Okay, you should be recording now. Okay, hello people. Thank you for joining the June webinar. This month we have Liz Jacobs from Legacy Aleworks in Jacksonville. She's going to be talking to us today about setting up a small-scale food service for your brewery taproom. And Liz, I'll go ahead and mute and let you take over.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. Hoping that anyone else who wants to join in afterwards or be able to catch the webinar after this gets posted to YouTube would be great. I wanted to introduce myself and talk a little bit about adding a small scale food kitchen. Legacy Aleworks is Jacksonville's southernmost brewery. We've been in operation since 2019. We're roughly 300 square feet, and by all means, we're pretty much a small brewery. So we're on track to do about 250 barrels this year. And when we initially established our brewery, we were planning on doing food service at some point, but we didn't want to start out the gate with it. And we weren't really sure what that was going to look like, whether it was going to be in-house food service or subletting the space or contracting that service out. But COVID kind of forced the hand a little bit in 2020 when, the state required all breweries to have some type of food service in-house if they wanted to reopen. So much like everyone else was running out to get hot dog rollers and microwaves and things like that, we kind of did the same thing. We decided, well, now's the time, so let's go ahead and move those plans forward. So we got ourselves a steam table, and we started doing hot dogs with different types of toppings, and started just implementing the kitchen that we knew that we were going to have. So though our kitchen started very makeshift in a sense, we did have a separate room that we planned on dedicating for a kitchen that we decided to kind of go back to that idea, implement the kitchen, and get started there. So that's kind of what we decided to do. So that's a sneak peek of our kitchen in its current state and when we first opened it. I am a member of the Pink Boot Society, and I have been obviously in the brewing world since we opened and in the planning stages. Prior to that, my background really is quite varied. I've worked in everything from finance and law to construction and interior design. So I do have quite a varied background. And though I never had any specific restaurant knowledge or experience, I've been blessed to have tremendous friends and great resources at my availability that I was able to tap into at the time that we wanted to start the kitchen. And I was able to really lean on those friends to kind of help us get up and running in an effective and efficient way. So that's a little bit about me. Today's agenda is I want to go into the do's, don'ts, and other considerations in regards to adding small scale food service to your existing brewery. I'm going to break it down in three stages: the planning stages, your daily operations, and then I'm going to go also into the marketing side just a little bit, because I do all of our in-house marketing as well. So a lot of those things kind of work hand in hand. I'm also going to touch base on a few resources that are available to you outside of this webinar that you can capitalize on to really kind of get a good amount of information to help you in your journey to start a kitchen. And then, of course, if there's any questions, we'll be able to address those at the end. So let's get started. In the planning stages, it can be really overwhelming. So it's a reminder to take deep breaths. It'll be okay. And to definitely allow yourself to start small. When you're in the planning stages, one of the things that you're going to want to do is definitely spend plenty of time planning your space. That's going to be consisted of visiting local kitchens, non-local and local kitchens, pubs, coffee shops, pretty much anywhere, anytime you're out getting food. Definitely make sure you are aware of how they're running their operations. What does their menu look like? How do they have their kitchen set up? If you happen to know them, or if it's not a busy time, you can definitely ask to kind of see the kitchen, poke around, see their layout, and ask a lot of questions. Looking at how much space do they allocate for storage, what kinds of plating and utensils are they using, how does that factor into the customer experience, and what kind of price point do they have there. Give yourself a lot of time in the planning stages because you want to set yourself up for success and give yourself that time. Definitely talk to everyone that you kind of come into contact with when you're visiting these spaces. Talk to the servers, the bussers, the bartenders. What do they like about their space? What don't they like? What would they do differently if they could? And really kind of get that information, because when you're in the planning stages, you might be able to mitigate a lot of those pain points that many food service establishments have. And knowing that on the front end at least allows you to prepare for that as well. Definitely plan on starting simple. You're going to need to provide a menu to the Division of Hotels and Restaurants during the application process for your kitchen. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. It all starts with the menu. If you want to start off with a few appetizers and a few bar eats, that is definitely recommended. You can always add later. Subtracting is a lot harder because once you have presented a food item to the customer, there is that expectation that that's going to be available to them. And when you take it away and that was an item that they liked, you do kind of struggle with that a little bit initially when you do take items away. And then when you are planning your menus, you're going to want to be as creative as you can, repeat ingredients when you can, and really try to keep your inventory list as simple as possible. Ideally, if you want to start to try to strive for 15 to 20% of food sales in your taproom sales, that would be an excellent place to start. It'll give your new kitchen and your bar staff time to adjust. And then you can always kind of scale up and really amplify after that. So 15 to 20% of your total sales being food would be a really great, initial goal to reach. Our current food setup, we actually started our kitchen back in 2020 during COVID. We ended up closing the kitchen in 2021, in the fall of 2021, because we ran into staffing issues, which just like the tap room side as well can be a pain. So we ended up closing temporarily while we managed that aspect. We do have a food partnership with a neighboring restaurant, and that has allowed us to continue to offer food service, though not necessarily in-house. And what we're doing during this time is that we are taking time to replan and re-navigate, what our kitchen's going to look like. It's going to allow us to remodel and really come back with a full and proper kitchen instead of the makeshift one we started in 2020 and 2020. So here's a little sneak peek of our existing layout of our kitchen. We have about 225 square feet of space allocated for our kitchen, and it's 14 by 16 foot room. And its current setup is we have a counter buffet area with under counter fridge and a couple pizza ovens on top. We've got the hand sink in the corner. And then we have a chest freezer, countertop, a couple prep areas, and dry storage. So it is definitely a small kitchen. It is a very simple kitchen. And our plan with the reopening is to stay simple as far as our food offerings. And I'll get into this in a second, that your menu is going to drive the requirements of your kitchen. So if you decide all of a sudden you want to do chicken fingers and fries and things like that, because it's very profitable and fried food always goes great at a bar, just know that you are going to have equipment requirements when you go through the application process with the state. So you're going to run into issues with things like vent hoods and exhaust and fire code issues and things like that. So just keep that in mind. For us, with our revamped kitchen, we are planning on still keeping it simple with appetizers, soups, flatbreads, sandwiches, and then we'll do periodic featured meals as well. So the right side shows you what the new layout is going to be, where we're going to have more access to cooler space. We'll be bringing a fridge inside the kitchen, and then doors both to the main tap room as well as to the bar area as well. So back to the planning stages. When you are factoring all your costs in, make sure you're considering everything, all the way down to your utensils, your how you're planning on plating your foods and things like that. If you're planning on disposable ware, which is not a bad idea if you're going to start with food service, but be sure that you're including that cost into your cost of goods. That all gets factored in. Test batching new menu items, food loss is going to affect your overall costs as well. Measuring out and weighing as you're making the foods obviously will help you control your food costs as well. And then how will you ensure that your staff is using the same measurements every single time that they're preparing a dish? So factor in a little bit of loss, because that's going to be inevitable, and include things like wrong orders, comps, and time, because time is a cost. And that includes things like prep time, cleaning up afterwards, and things like that. Ideal margins on food are going to be 20 to 30% food cost. So if you are planning on doing, let's say, a flatbread and you want to sell it for $9.99 in your tap room, you're going to want to have your cost somewhere in the $2 to $3 range. Lower margin item is okay on the menu if it's a popular item and you're going to put out a lot of it, or you're going to have little loss, or it has great shelf life. So if you do have an item that is going to cost you a little bit more, for example, in the photo on this page here, I have our charcuterie, our pretzel charcuterie option, which was one of our lower margin items because our food cost on that was pretty close to 40%. It was an extremely popular item. It was pretty easy to put together and prepare, and we just cranked out a whole bunch of them. So, don't necessarily shy away from something that might be over that 30% threshold, but you definitely want to ensure that the majority of your items kind of ride in that 20 to 30%. And then establish relationships with your suppliers and your local reps. Definitely make sure that you challenge them to give you better pricing and availability. Remember, they do work for you no matter how small your tap room is, so you can shop around and you can work with other companies as well. So definitely establish those relationships early on. As far as don't start with cheap equipment. During COVID, we did that because we just needed to get back open. I definitely don't recommend that because it will cost you more money in the end, and it will slow down your kitchen and things like that if those equipment pieces aren't efficient for your needs. For example, a crock pot is great for keeping things warm, but it's not great for heating things up. So you factor those things in. You don't necessarily need a $5,000 pizza oven to start, but you definitely want to start with the commercial ones. The ones that we used in our kitchen were $500 commercial ovens, and they've been great for us. But the prior oven that we had did not. So just keep that in mind. Don't overcomplicate your menu. It's it needs to be easy to describe and easier to make. Again, time is money, so keep that in mind. You don't have to have daily specials or a seasonal menu, especially at first. People do like consistency, so making sure you have a menu that will be the mainstay, or having those core items. As I'm sure with your beer, having those core beers are really important because though people like those seasonals and one-offs, they do want to come back to what they like. So definitely keep that in mind with your menu as well. Try not to give in too much to everybody's input. Everyone's going to have an opinion on what you should be serving or what you should be doing. And Though you might want to test an item out, that's okay, but don't feel obligated to appeal to every dietary restriction, vegan, gluten-free, you know, uh, vegetarians and things like that. You do want to have a variety, but you don't want to necessarily have to have something to accommodate every single dietary restriction. Survey if you want, but just remember that, if your food is going to be, let's say, 15 to 20% of your total sales, and of that, only a small handful are people with a particular dietary restriction, we're really talking about tens of dollars, not hundreds or thousands of dollars. Don't rely on your bar staff to manage the kitchen. Start off on the right foot. Back when we first launched our kitchen during COVID, we kind of figured, well, hot dogs are really easy. We'll have like an extra bartender on, and then we can handle the food that way. And they can present a challenge. So make sure that when you're starting, start small, but make sure you have an actual dedicated kitchen person. Go back to that simplicity of the menu so that you can effectively run with one person. Bar staff in the kitchen will reduce the amount of time that they spend out in the tap room doing more sales and giving your guests a good customer service experience. In planning considerations, again, I keep saying it starts with the menu because it really does. It doesn't mean you can't change it once you're open. Again, the hotels and restaurants are going to require you to present that menu, and that equipment that you get and will be required to have will be based on that menu. So if your menu is going to have deep fried items or any type of grease-laden vapors, that's going to result in a lot higher things, such as like hoods, vents, fire, and other considerations. Boku bucks there. When you're in the licensing process, they're also going to look at your other surfaces to make sure that they're scrubbable surfaces. Check and see what kind of ceiling you're going to have in the kitchen. If you're going to have something like ceiling tile, for example, it needs to be scrubbable. I've seen some people use plexiglass shields above the bar to create that separation of surface area. They're going to want to make sure that the ceiling can be cleaned, as well as all the areas underneath your cabinets and around your cabinets as well. Licensing requirements will also require you to have a certified food manager. It's a fairly easy process. It is a little time consuming, but if you're starting with a small kitchen, you will only be required to have one certified manager who is responsible for all periods of operation, but they do not have to be physically present at all times. Once your kitchen gets to the point where you have 3 or more people working in the kitchen, then you will be required to have a certified food manager during all hours of operation. So keep that in mind as well. Menu flexibility. Remember that you are the boss, and you are going to have the ability to now dictate the seasonality and the foods that you offer. In the past, if you've had food trucks or neighboring restaurants, you've kind of been reliant on what they have to offer as far as that goes. So now you have that new flexibility. So definitely take advantage of that. Lastly, think about what kind of planning you're going to have for table service. Are you planning on having them continue to do counter service, or will you have that? It can be a slippery slope, so proceed with caution. If you are going to stay with counter service solutions, think about the ordering process. Are you going to need table numbers for the customers? How are you planning on handling tickets for the kitchen? Are you going to walk them over to the kitchen? Are you going to need a separate printer for the kitchen? Definitely think through the ordering process and see if you can mitigate some of the bottlenecks that you might have there. With things like calling out names versus giving table numbers, think about that as well. How is that going to affect your overall customer experience? So that's the planning stages, the do's, don'ts, and other considerations. If there are any planning questions, feel free to chime in now. Otherwise, I am going to move along. We will have a chance for additional questions at the end as well. Daily operations. Once your kitchen is up and running, you're going to want to keep your eye on the ball. So I'd start with by saying to definitely invest in training. You want to make sure that you're training everyone. It's very easy to end up in a situation where your kitchen member calls out, and then all of a sudden you've got to hop into the kitchen and have someone from the bar do that. So make sure that you are training everyone. Make sure your entire staff has their food handling license. At our brewery from day one, that was kind of our plan, was to make sure everybody had their food handler license anyway. I know that some agency officers, when they come in and do their periodic visits, some required it, some didn't. It was kind of a gray area, so we just erred on the side of caution and had everybody get that food handler license. But it's definitely important to make sure that your staff is properly trained. You never know when a brewer or a bartender or someone will need to step in, so have a plan for call outs, and definitely make sure that in training you have kind of gone over the basic process. Give them a walkthrough on the kitchen, let everybody see where everything is, so that way if they do have to jump in, they know where everything is and they can kind of jump in and help out. Creating cheat sheets. Cheat sheets save lives and dollars. It also helps you to create a consistent customer experience. So here is an example of our cheat sheet. On the left there, it showed you what the dish would be plated like, and it told you the basic ingredients, and it had very simple instructions for the preparation of the item. So making sure you have those cheat sheets can definitely help you keep an eye also on your food costs as well, because here you're also allocating how much of each item you are going to be using. Monitor your food costs. Suppliers change prices regularly, so you need to think about that. Are your paper plates too thin and now you need to use 2 paper plates? Those food costs can start to escalate, so keep those in mind as well. Are you getting a lot of broken dishes when you're using porcelain? I know in the bar side, we break glasses all the time, so you have to factor in replacing that periodically. Perhaps using melamine versus porcelain or ceramic might work for your kitchen. So think about those types of things. A sample here of our food profitability audit. I just took a sample period here to show you how we did monitor our food costs on a weekly basis. We included things like comps and discounts to get your total net food. You factor in your staffing costs and time, and then of course all your food costs to kind of get your net profitability. So you can definitely keep an eye on that, and those dollars do end up adding up to really good potential revenues for your business. Let's see. Operation don'ts. I'm sorry, let me step back real quick. Giving your staff the tools to work efficiently and things like that. You want to make sure that you're using proper tools such as scoops and ladles that are pre-measured. Definitely, if there's an opportunity to do any prep beforehand, consider doing that. One of the things that we did with our charcuterie, for example, is that we pre-sliced everything on Monday. We weighed them. We put, plastic sheets or deli paper in between each set of portions, and we were able to then just grab that amount. You'll notice the next time you go into a sub shop or the Publix deli, when they're preparing that, they oftentimes have that pre-sliced, pre-laid out, and pre-measured, so that way you're getting you're controlling your food costs, and you're also increasing the speed in which they can produce. So keep an eye on that. And then regularly evaluate your service, evaluate the process, evaluate the kitchen and where they're getting bottlenecked or bogged down, and see what you can do to help mitigate that. Obviously, think about presentation a lot, monitor that, and make sure that the kitchen staff is putting out consistent presentation. And then as well as the bar side and ordering process and getting from start to finish. You want to just kind of make sure you're regularly evaluating service in that regard. As far as operation don'ts, you don't want to limit kitchen hours too much. Find a nice balance. So if you are planning on only having your kitchen open Thursday through Sunday, you can definitely expect someone to come in on a Wednesday afternoon and say, hey, I'd like to order something from the kitchen, especially if they've been there before and have had the food. So be careful when you're making those decisions about limiting the kitchen. A suggestion and something that worked for us was we had a limited menu available at all hours of operation, something very simple that the bar could kind of jump in and help. But then during the main happy hour to dinner hours, we did have the kitchen in full operation. And that allowed us to kind of find a little balance in regards to still having food available, but also not having full kitchen staff there during these hours, which you may most likely not have food orders coming in. Don't get stagnant. It's okay to change up the menu a bit, and it's okay to go seasonally, but do so in strategic ways. Don't change it up too often, and keep those popular items on at all times if you can, unless absolutely necessary. Balance is key in a lot of these things. So don't be afraid to change it up periodically. Don't compromise on the customer experience. You are a brewery, and one of the things that we are very proud of as breweries is that we have that standard of customer experience that you don't get when you go to a typical restaurant or a bar. So make sure that that follows through now that you're adding food service to your kitchen. If you wouldn't settle for bubbles on your glass, then don't settle for the same in the food. So make sure the plating is pretty. Make sure it is clean when you're sending that out, and make sure you are putting those on dishes if you can. If you're starting out with paper plates, that's fine, but have a plan. Use the bamboo plates, disposable plates that are both good for the environment and also have a very pretty look to them. So keep those types of things in mind. Don't expect your staff to keep an eye on your bottom line. That is a very easy way to lose lots of bucks. Taking too long to close, or waiting till the end of the night at the end of service to do dishes, those types of things can add up. If there's a slow period in time, your staff should be washing those dishes in between and not waiting till the end of service to then clean everything. Staff leaving food out that can go bad in a matter of hours, keeping an eye on that sort of thing. You're going to want to keep a close eye because that can also be a slippery slope. People get comfortable. So you want to make sure that you do have someone keeping an eye on that kitchen staff at all times to make sure that you're not losing dollars there. And other considerations. Food is going to increase your tips and your ticket sales. So it is okay to have higher expectations from your bar staff. Definitely work on training with them on sales techniques now that you're adding food. Have them include and ask for food with every initial order. Would you like to start with a flight? Sure. Okay, great. And while you're at it, if you're interested in some munchies, here you go. You definitely want to factor that in. Think about how you're going to calculate tips. We went with a very simple model as far as calculating tips. We basically, our current operation, we tip pool nightly. So whether you open or whether you close, tips are distributed based off of the numbers of hours that you worked in that shift. So here's a simple example that we did our kitchen tips based off of a percentage of the food sales. So in this example, food sales represented 20% of our total sales for the evening. And so we allowed 50% of that percentage to go to the kitchen, while as the other 50% went to the bar. This allowed us to ensure that the bar staff was still doing their job as far as selling the food, and then the kitchen staff obviously getting their tips for helping to prepare, service the orders, and clean up. So figure out how you plan on calculating those tips and have a plan for when your kitchen starts, so that way you're not scrambling after the fact on that. Have opening and closing checklists. I'm very much a fan of checklists. It keeps things very structured, and you can always refer back to them. And when you're training your staff, you can use those checklists in training, and then at the same time, regularly have them refer back to these checklists. So having checklists for opening and closing procedures is important, as well as a weekly cleaning and inventory checklist. You're going to want to make sure that you are also doing regular sales training for all your staff. If you plan on bringing a new featured item on the menu, for example, the one shown in this picture was our pulled pork sliders that we did in the summer. You want to make sure that you're sharing it with your staff so that they can taste it and describe it. You want to make sure that they know that that's a featured item for that period of time, that you're really trying to push it, and have them make those recommendations at the time that they're selling to the customers. Customers will buy what they see and what you suggest to them. I'm sure with your bar staff, you currently talk to them about grabbing another round when they come back up to the bar, or starting off with the flight. Those are sales trainings that do apply to the food side as well. And that's for the operations side. If there's any questions, feel free to chime in. Again, I will be going over final questions again at the end, if there are any. The last section that we're going to talk about is marketing. Marketing is a very vital part of your kitchen operation once you get that up and running, and is going to be a big driving force of helping you sell your food when your bar staff is busy and not available, or when your taproom is closed. Definitely make sure that you kind of keep an eye on that and incorporate marketing into your kitchen strategy. Thinking about plating, we talked a little bit about that earlier with regards to the customer experience and expectation. But on the marketing side, remember that how you plate, people oftentimes still photograph and post on Instagram the foods and the things that they're ordering. So think about that when you are, establishing a regular service and how each service goes. You want to make sure that their plating is consistent and in line with what you envision, because that is going to affect what ends up getting posted online, and that will speak volumes. Think and plan a season ahead. This helps you make sure that you are controlling your costs in the right way. So you don't want to come up with an Oktoberfest meal at the end of September. You want to start thinking about that in June and July, so that you've had time to source the best pricing for your food. You have time to sample it, work through the operational side of how is that dish going to affect your service in the kitchen from a plating standpoint, and then also gives you a chance to photograph it and get it ready for marketing it during that season. So always plan on thinking a season ahead. Consider either daily deals or specials. Though food does not have the greatest of margins like the beer does, you might want to think outside of the box, like creating packages. Taco Tuesday, for example. If you want to create a taco and have that paired with the beer, and you do a package deal where you get, let's say, a pint and 2 tacos for $10, then great. That allows you to give perceived value to the customer and also push an item that you're wanting to push at that time. And people will buy those packages because it's very simple, it's easy. I don't have to think about this. I can just enjoy a beer and some food, and that sounds good to me. So keep that in mind. Train the staff to market the food. This talks about, it goes into keywords when marketing the food, when they're showing a customer a sample menu, pointing to the item on the menu or saying the second one down from the left. Those types of things will help them push the food to the customer. Customers, again, they do purchase what they are suggested, and they do purchase what they see. So if you're going to have photos in your menu, make sure that they're good looking photos. Be sure to survey regularly. We do a survey twice a year that we send out. We do one that goes into the bar service as well as the food options. And you'd be interested to see some of the feedback that you get and some of the suggestions. We've had some great ideas come back through some of our surveys. So definitely consider surveying frequently. Make sure you also take that information with a grain of salt. As I mentioned earlier, you want to be careful not to give in to too many suggestions and feel the need to have to change everything because you got one particular suggestion for a niche type item. So definitely take that info with a grain of salt. Listen to the reviews online. One of the things that we noticed is that the only negative reviews we ever received were in regards to food. At the time, the food service was outsourced, so we didn't have a lot of control on that. So we had to respond in that sense. But food, something about food gives people the need to either rave about it online or narc about it online. And so they're going to criticize and go to Yelp and go to Google, and they will criticize the food. So that's why it's super important in the planning stages to really think through everything and make sure your food can be consistent, good quality, and in line with what you are expecting to serve on the bar side as well. So it all has to work cohesively and it all has to be consistent. If you start getting a negative review online, don't freak out about it, obviously, but you can now start using that as learning experiences on how to get back on track to make sure that you are giving that consistent experience. Don't forget about food costs when you're creating those specials. As I mentioned earlier, the margins are fairly low on food. And so you want to be careful with that and make sure that you're either upselling when you're doing the special, creating packages. For example, in the photo here, we did a special, it was like a Super Bowl Sunday special where you could order 3 cans of beer to go, and you could also order a package deal that included an appetizer platter as well. So be a little creative when you're thinking about specials and try not to deduct, like taking $1 off, and try to think more about adding. So adding a free app and things like that during, happy hour could be a better option, adding versus taking away. Don't repeat too often. That includes your photos, your menu items. Definitely, repetition is good to a certain extent, but you want to make sure that you're not doing them too often. Doing a particular promotion can turn people off. So if you're doing this special and then you're doing this special every, let's say, every 3rd week, you might find people holding off for those specials before they make those purchases. When you are making changes to your menu, don't forget to update all avenues. It can be very confusing where your menus, you'd be very surprised where your menu can be found. When we started doing kitchen, all of a sudden we found our menu available on Grubhub, and we didn't even have an account with them. They just took our menu and pasted it on there. So make sure that you are passing any changes along to all avenues. That's your website. If you're part of the Florida Hop Passport, you're going to want to update, if your menu's there, if it's available there. Obviously, all your social media channels as well. It does not hurt to periodically Google search yourself and see what comes up, and even put in your name and menu and see what's coming up in those search fields and go, oh, I've got to update it there. Didn't realize Yelp had a picture of my old menu on there. So definitely keep that in mind. And then marketing considerations is going to include things like investing in food photography. You can only do so much with your cell phones. Obviously, cell phones are great these days because they can really give you nice, high quality photos. But with food, there is a particular nuance that comes with setting it up to look its best. So you definitely want to make sure you are doing that somewhat professionally. Doing it all at once is good from a consistency standpoint. So if you're going to actually set up a day where you're going to have professional photography done, make sure you're using similar lighting and similar editing things with that. You don't want to apply filters and things like that to your food. You want to make sure they're looking in their best light across the board. You can change it up periodically to make sure that you're having new content. Taking that pizza and putting it here versus putting it there will allow you to then, for seasonality purposes, keep it fresh versus seeing the same picture of the same pretzel every single time you're offering that. So make sure you are investing in good food photography. Definitely plan on doing some pairings on your menu. If you have room on your menu and you can include that in the actual print version of the menu, pairs best with this brown ale would be a great way to make sure that you're really giving the customer that opportunity to really enhance that experience with a proper pairing. The last thing you want is this very tropical IPA paired with this very pronounced food dish that maybe has a lot of spice to it and maybe would, conflict with it. So make sure that when you're doing those pairings, they do make sense. In the marketing side, get creative, create events around the menu. You can do things like we did pints and a picnic in the summer and had summer themed. You can do beer pairing dinners. Figure out how you're going to handle the kitchen during those times if you're doing those types of dinners. But definitely think outside the box and get creative with doing events geared around the food now. Feel free to collaborate still with outside food vendors. Have a food truck do a kitchen takeover one weekend, or have a guest chef come in from another restaurant or something. Those are great ways to keep things fresh. You can still market those and keep your kitchen being a front runner as far as a part of your sales. Does a local spice company have 10,000 followers and you want to incorporate that spice in a featured dish? Think about not just from the food standpoint, but also the other areas as well on how you can collaborate. When you're marketing online, make sure you're considering your hashtags and your post types. So stalk others, look and see what they're doing, and see, if they're doing, Florida foodie as a hashtag, then you're going to want to incorporate some of those periodically and see how those help as far as your overall social media engagement. Repeat and find a place to carve out your own unique position. So if you are a particularly, let's say you're near a farm that has corn, for example, and you want to incorporate that into your menu, definitely find little ways to have that unique strategy for your area. And then just remember that customers are not going to automatically know about your kitchen. So don't assume that just because you post the menu or have it printed and available in the taproom that they're going to know that it's there. So give your customers time to get used to having that kitchen and know about it. Introduce your customers to that. One of our favorite things is during downtime, we ask our staff to prepare a half platter, so many portions, and walk around and give free samples. You do that right at the right strategic time, and all of a sudden people start realizing they're hungry and start ordering food. So of course, be sure to include that in your food costs as part of your loss, but those are great ways to introduce your customers to your new kitchen. Another thing that we did as well is we had a focus group consisting of some of our regulars and our Founders Club members. So we invited them for a tasting, and we used them as a focus group to get their feedback on the plating, on the cost, on the prep, and on the offerings. And then we used that information to then help kind of build our menu from there. So make sure you remember that you still need to, just because you have the kitchen there, just because you have the menu there, doesn't mean customers are going to automatically know about your kitchen. So I kind of went across the gambit and went into both the planning stages, the operational stages, as well as in marketing. Hopefully this hasn't, deterred anybody from actually trying to move forward with having their kitchen. But if you are still thinking about it, if that's something that you really want to learn a little bit more about, I definitely consider reaching out to some other resources as well. The Brewers Association has some great resources for you as well. These are active links. So if you get your hands on a copy of this PowerPoint after this session, you can actually click on these and take you to these different resources. But the Brewers Association has some. Last year at the Florida Brewers Guild conference in August, there was a presentation done by Tim Brady, who really talked about the sales side and the training side of the food. So I definitely recommend reviewing that as well. And he did make himself available if you had additional questions and wanted to ask about the sales and marketing of your food and your kitchen. And then, of course, there are other resources such as the Restaurant Association, your Chamber of Commerce. Your food suppliers actually have a tremendous amount of resources as well. Everything from ways to calculate your food costs to conventions of their own. They do have access to quite a lot, so make sure that you check in with them as well. And establish some alliances with some food trucks. They know very well how to run a very tight ship in a small amount of space and have a very effective kitchen running. So if you have any food truck friends, definitely lean on them and chat with them as well. And then of course, your staff and your customer tastings as well. So these are some great other resources to make sure that you have all the information needed so that you can confidently open a kitchen and have a running and successful kitchen going. And with that, I'll leave you with a quote. We know it needs to be done, and all that's missing is the will to do it. You absolutely can have a successful kitchen. It can actually be a nice, significant revenue generator for you. It will help sell more beer. It will bring more people in, and it will allow people to stay longer. So definitely, if that is something that you're interested in doing, don't be afraid to pull the plunge and just actually move forward with doing it. If you've made it this far, you are awesome. And I leave myself available if you have any other specific questions that you want me to answer, be happy to do so. But with that, I think that's a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. This has been great. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
When talking back to staffing, specifically for kitchen labor, how do you, when you look at your labor percentage as a compared to your top line revenue, total sales, are you determining your labor based on just food sales or for all revenue sales when looking at kitchen labor?
When I looked at my kitchen exclusively, so when I was factoring my labor hours, I was looking just at the kitchen labor side and just the food sales proportion to it, because I needed to know that my food service was still going to be profitable. And we ended up probably about a 25% overall margin, which for food is actually pretty decent. And a lot of that was us fine-tuning our menu to make sure that we could run the kitchen with one person. That requires somebody to be able to prep very quickly, obviously. When they're dealing with multiple orders, they've got to be able to access everything very, very easily. We did bring in a second person periodically, like on Friday and Saturday nights during the very busy, dinner hour. But for the most part, the kitchen was able to run with a single person. And that allowed us to definitely keep the labor costs to where we could then still make money on the food.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think that's a wrap. If there are any other questions, of course, anyone's welcome to reach out to me. I'm available on the forum as well as by email. And I am planning on being at the conference this year to kind of mix and mingle. So if you see me, flag me down, say hi.
Yeah, definitely. And I've recorded this and I will post this in our YouTube channel and post a link to it on our forum. And yeah, with that, Liz, thank you so much. And thanks everyone that joined today.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Have a good one.